Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're listening to this or watching it now on the YouTubes. We are joined today by a fan favourite, one of the very first people we ever had on the Stromcast, Dave Crosland, for episode 33. Dave, how are you? I believe you're doing much better than you did last year.
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Yeah, I had a heart attack end of November, but shit happens.
Just one of
Uh,
the little heart attacks. Well, I think you probably had a few little wobbles
well,
through the year.
yeah, I definitely did. Basically, I had what's called an MI, a myocardial infarction, which is a blockage of the blood supply. It's not the blood supply around the body. I think a lot of people get confused with this. It's the blood supply that feeds the heart, so the heart works.
Yeah.
The result of that is that part of the heart doesn't get blood supply, dies, or damages.
Yeah.
So I had about 4.5 hours of no supply to the sort of basically the left bottom half of my heart. My heart's fucked anyway, from being such a big twat and loads of drugs. But to be fair, yeah, I feel all right. Considering the stupid hours I do and everything else, I feel good.
Yeah.
And I had felt shitty for several months. I just put it down to workload.
Yeah.
They fitted a stent, and as soon as the stent went in, I just felt brand new. And yeah, I'm good. Dropping weight, it's been a bit hit and miss post Christmas.
We've
Just
been a
can't
busy
seem to
boy.
get quite. Well, it's not just that. I'll do 3-4 days good, and then I'll be a bit of a wobble, and I just can't seem to get back into that groove I had where I was on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it is still coming down. It's just not coming down anywhere near as fast as it was.
Well, we've talked about before. You're not someone who removing body weight comes natural to anyway.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but I mean, I'm 22. I'm bouncing. I was bouncing between 22.7 and 23. I'm now bouncing between 22 and 22.7. But I am only on 1,600 calories a day, and progress is slow at that.
yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that within this industry or within all humans, people are either predisposed to naturally be heavier and heavier or naturally be smaller and smaller, and most people have a lean one way or the other. You definitely lean all the way towards getting big. Um, so one of the first things I want to do today, for those of you who are listening, we're gonna cover some of the stupidest things that Dave has ever seen, ever heard of, ever been around. We want to specifically talk about drugs and just the most ludicrous, ridiculous things that we've seen and heard of. And we're also going to talk a little bit about something called frog juice. But before we do that, I was listening to one of the first ever Stromcasts we did the other day, and Dave on that, I think it was your first cycle. Dave said on that, we've got this little sideline called Eval. We do. I've done blood analysis for years, and we've decided to start doing some blood tests. And we've got a van, and we're going to go around to some places and do some blood tests for people. And that's not really a fair description of Eval anymore, is it, Dave?
So Eval originally was just going to be blood analysis, i.e., you send your bloods, you get a report for it. Hence the name Eval blood analysis. Then we started testing. Testing went well. We now have a pathology lab between ourselves and Youth Revisited, which went fully live for our use anyway this week. We've got physical static locations. I think we've got 8 or 9. Hang on, let me think. 5, Glasgow, Huddersfield, Bradford, Exeter, Norfolk, Bournemouth, Wales. And then we have the mobile. We're just about in the process of setting up for Ireland. And then we're working on something else for some further afield.
Right. Okay.
I've got a meeting about it tomorrow morning. But yeah, it's become a beast of its own. We've spent the last 2 years sort of trying to get the background stuff right and putting everything back into it and trying to expand it. Not so much in the sense of growth of the business from size, but from a point of view of, so I like the lab, you know what I mean? So that side of development of the business. And this year we're now going to push for growth.
Sure. And for those who aren't familiar with Eval, I think people who listen to this will be, but we get 15 to 20,000 people listen to this, and I don't know who they are. Eval offers, as well as your traditional, you can come to one of your sites and get a blood test, and what other services are you currently offering?
I think what sets us slightly apart from everyone else is that you get a report that analyzes your bloods in a realistic and practical way for what you're doing. So, for argument's sake, you're running 1.5 grams of test a week and your estrogen is high. You won't just get your estrogen high, you'll get your estrogen is high, recommend X at X dose at X times a week.
Yeah.
So, I've had a lot of criticism for being non-medically trained. But that I looked into doing certain things from a clinical certification point of view.
Well, as soon as
But
you do that, you have a duty of care to give. Whereas,
I
what,
can't start advising people to take drugs off script.
of course, I mean,
Even
look, those who know Strom will know that if you want to come to me with your blood test from whoever, for me to have a frank conversation with you over Zoom or a consultation to discuss anecdotal drug use, that's something that I have done for years. It's not something that Aaron, who runs the Hedge Project, could do because he has a duty of care as a medical practitioner, and they're very different things, aren't they?
Yeah, so I've deliberately avoided going down that route. We have doctors. I've got two that we have on the books, but I've always gone down that route of avoiding that because it gives me the flexibility to be open and honest with the individuals I'm speaking to.
Yeah, I don't know if you would agree with me, but I speak to people regarding bloods quite a bit, and I think the thing that's important to understand when you're looking at ranges and things is situationally appropriate.
Yeah, I mean the other thing is
not that I ever want to justify things being wildly out of range, but if I have if there's a logical reason as to why something looks the way it looks, that's less concerning than something being wildly out of range that you have no explanation for.
Well, the other thing is genetic anomalies as well, and people don't actually realize this. The amount of people I deal with that base their test levels on American ranges, and the American ranges are based on the genetic population of America, not the UK.
And just because I don't actually know, are Americans more or less testosterone than us?
They are more. And as a populace, they seem much more tolerant of it. Whereas our populace, if we ran high-end GDLs of 1,000, 1,200 like the Yanks do, most people are going to start struggling with low HDL and thick blood. But the Americans seem to tolerate it very, very well. Little genetic anomalies like Asian descent will have naturally high red blood cells in comparison to a white Caucasian. So all this comes into it as well. You know, the amount of times I see blood work from someone who's a Pakistani or an Indian, and there's RBC is really high, and someone says, "Oh, you need to do a blood work." No, actually, that's what they're like. That's genetics for them. That's natural. So things like that need to be considered as well. That I think a lot of people don't grasp with.
Sure.
I mean, as time's gone on with the exposure to so many bloods now, I've started to build up a nice picture, shall we say, of variants. And as the new software develops with the lab and the way that's going to operate long term, that should actually, in say, probably be 2 years away, but it should give some really useful data dumps. And we're now working with Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds unis. Been speaking to King's College as well, actually. So we're starting to make inroads into some support with research as well through ASUK.
And I suppose when we're talking about harm reduction, what we want to be as a group, I guess, looking at is what things are normal within a PED and a PED using community that have long-term deleterious outcomes, and what are things that perhaps are a little better tolerated, I would say. Would you tend to agree?
Yeah, there's always going to be an individual's natural tolerance to certain things. In the same way we have people that are sensitive to estrogen, we'll have people that are sensitive to thicker blood and all sorts of things like that.
I mean, one example I was talking about with someone the other day, if you are using orals or you're using certain compounds, your HDL is almost always going to be suppressed. And there's not much you can do to bring that up while you're on that cycle. There's bits you can do to improve it, but the chances of you getting it into the normal range are slim. And
lowering of HDL on cycle, if you're using the DHT or orals, is unavoidable. The problem we have currently is that people aren't repairing that between cycles.
Yeah.
And quite funny. Me and Broderick had this conversation not last Friday because we missed Friday before. And he actually, now Broderick was a big proponent of the test with MAST or test with Primo TRT, the sports TRT. And even he said himself, he had moved away from higher test dose sort of things because he was concerned about the impact on kidney and renal function and that sort of stuff and blood pressure. And I got all that. He says, but even he's like, now, I think we've just got another problem now, which is going to be arterial blockage through cholesterol manipulation.
Well, you can't. There isn't a cheat code, is there? Unfortunately, there isn't a magic combination of drugs we can take when we're off cycle that will effectively still be androgenically driving without a payoff health wise.
Yeah, I think people forget that I was taught something when I was 16. And I was in an economics lesson, and the teacher went, "There is no such thing as a free school meal." And me being the clever cunt, I went, "Yeah, there is. He's on them." And all sorts. And I argued black and blue with him that there was. And the truth is, there isn't. Nothing is for free. There's always a cost involved somewhere down the line to somebody at some point.
Well, without getting political, we're seeing that right now with furlough and track and trace.
Well, yeah. So, but the same applies to drugs.
Yeah.
And the bigger reward something gives you, the bigger the cost is going to be. The dangerous stuff is when people don't know the cost, so they're making a decision based on incorrect information, or they don't see the cost, which then means there's something going on in the background you're not aware of, mate.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of people genuinely were naive to the...
But then doses and times of usage were much shorter. So what has changed is doses on average have got bigger, but more than anything, the period of time or the duration of use is much greater.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've talked about that before in terms of blood work being so available, harm reduction, people then going, well, my blood work's fine. But you talk about the HDL is a really good one. If you've done a 20-week, a 24-week, a 30-week cycle, which is much more common now than it used to be, and your HDL has been suppressed for that whole cycle, it's not enough to get off cycle and then get your HDL up as quickly as you can and go, right, my HDL's fine again. I can go back to cycle.
And that HDL
needs to be elevated for a period of time to remove the damage that's been done. And
that is very much the attitude people have with bloods. We have a much better environment within the community where people are much more health conscious and responsible, but we also have, off the back of that, a dismissing of certain markers because, that's because you're on. Or, well, yeah, my bloods are in range now, so I'm going back up. Yeah, but they've been in range for a week, mate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
1 week of HDL being 1.2 doesn't make up for the last 20 where it was 0.47.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you've got to just start looking at things a bit more long term.
So we did it wasn't me and you, it was me and Paul Scarborough did a podcast 4 or 5 years ago with Aaron Hudson, and we were asked what we thought would be the big health issue that we would see more of as things go on. And I think we said at the time, blood pressure induced kidney issues.
Yeah, I would have said the same at the time.
What would you say now?
MI. Heart attack.
Yeah.
I mean, I think heart attacks and cardiac problems have always been there. They've always been a strong underlying problem. But I hope I'm wrong. I was a little bit wrong with the kidneys. I did see a little bit of a flurry. And one of the stupid things I was going to talk about is around that. But not to the extent that I expected. But I think we will see something with the cardiology side of things.
Because of the length and exposure of androgens.
Yeah.
I think duration's a huge one. I think while the whole 12 weeks on and then PCT and then time off equals time on plus PCT equals time off, while that wasn't necessarily based in a massive amount of science, it did ensure that people were on no more than half of the year.
And that is a big issue. The other issue is that very few people actually monitor TRT.
Yeah, and you may have a different opinion of this. I don't think 35 is the goal in terms of nanomoles when you're on TRT. You know, I hear that regularly. I want to be right at the top end of the normal range. Well, were you right at the top end of the normal range naturally? Is that what your physiology?
No. The other thing is naturally you ebb and flow. So you might actually be 29 at 9 o'clock in the morning, but you're going to be 20, 18 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You're not going to be 29 all day, all night, every fucking day of the week.
Yeah.
And that's the other problem. So even sensible, well, what a lot of people say, well, I run it sensible, I run at 25, because it's a constant,
Yeah.
it's still going to cause problems
So
long term.
This is purely anecdotal. This is purely my experience. But as you know, I had to go on TRT. I came off everything cold turkey over a year ago when I had my heart issues. And I went on to TRT probably 5 months after I came off everything because my test never came back to more than 3. I spoke to you about it very briefly at the time. I spoke to a couple of other people, and I decided to try the daily, very small sub-Q TRT. And my personal experience of that was that I had no libido, no sex drive whatsoever. My test levels were very consistent, and I felt like garbage. And I now run 150 milligrams of SIP every 7 to 10 days. And for whatever reason, I find that, for me, feels much more normal.
I personally think if you get the absorption from it, gel is probably the closest you're going to get to replicating natural.
Because of that.
Because of the peak and trough. But some people just do not get the absorption from it, and that's where it falls down.
Sorry, I just realised that I stink.
Oh, that's nothing new.
I only get it in one armpit, though.
You look like you stink, to be honest. You've got that look about you today.
That's fair, yeah. So, yeah, that covers a lot of stuff. More interesting than yeah, we got more in depth than I expected to there. But it is interesting. And I certainly duration of use is the thing that worries me at the moment. Particularly when you speak to younger people, the response I get, if this is, this is someone that I've spoken to recently because it's been a topic. I'm not just being a grumpy old man and not wanting people to do loads of drugs because I can't anymore, which I think is what people sometimes think. The duration of time people are spending on genuinely worries me. And I know when you're 23, 24, I tend to get told, I've only got so much time. I've got to make this amount of improvement in this season. And actually, a lot of bodybuilders are in their prime in their 30s and later, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to this. I do think that basic drug use has become very flippant, but there's also an anti against higher cycles because it's actually unfashionable to have a higher cycle now because you're going against
talk about it.
Yeah, because you're going against this trend of health.
Yeah.
But actually, I generally believe in certain cases that you'd be better doing a higher dose 3-month cycle and get the job done.
Yeah.
Than fannying about with this middle of the road, not quite where it needs to be cycle, but doing it month on month on month on month on month.
I can certainly see the argument for that. Things like ventricular hypertrophy are going to be driven by duration, not just volume.
It's just like, well, you've just got to be realistic about where you are, what you want to achieve, and none of us are stepping on an Olympia stage on 500 mega test a week.
No.
Nobody.
No, that's absolutely fair. And I think in this conversation about health, that sometimes gets lost.
Yeah, I abuse the living shit out of it, and I carry the scars, and I will carry the scars for the rest of my days.
But you were fucking massive.
Well, yeah, I was big, but I did a lot of stupid shit and stuff that, though I would probably not abate from getting massive and taking that level of dosage again, there would be a few things I would potentially have changed. But yeah, I learned a lot from that. And I do see people fannying about and they want to get to X, which is over here, and they're here, and they just keep going step back. Oh, well, I can't, it's unhealthy. Well, and you think that's healthy?
Yeah.
Sometimes you've just got to be realistic about what it takes to get to where you want to go. And there's always risk, and there's always going to be risk management. But it's like Primo, our Primo's safe. You can take what you want. 2 gram of fucking Primo is not safe.
And it's a DHT.
Yeah. A
Yeah,
2 gram primo is going to put your fucking HDL at 0.2. It's going to hammer the living shit out of it, but it's not safe. You know, if I take 1 aspirin, I'm fine. I take 200, I'm going to be in a fucking mess.
Yeah, I mean, we both know that there are still people out there that are running a gram of tren and 2 grams of test and so on. It just doesn't get talked about anymore, and I think that's, you know, that's a lack of honesty is never good within a drug using culture.
Of anything, no. You know, there are the time and places when that I have a couple of clients that push big size, and their drug doses aren't shy.
Well, they're never going to be, are they? But
No.
that's a risk reward conversation that's individual to the person. If someone turns around and says, "This is what I want to do," and I don't give a fuck, you say, "Cool. Well, then, what's the best way we can do that?"
Yeah, but at the same time, I've got someone who wants to lose a bit of fat for a wedding, and they're like, "Oh, you know, I was thinking, you know, can we go on T3 and can I run a bit of tren and can I?" And it's like, can you fuck?
Yeah.
What? Because you're too fucking lazy to do some cardio and not eat shit? No,
Yeah.
fuck off. You wanted someone to do that? Go get another fucking coach.
Yeah. No, so on the subject, obviously, trend for your wedding, that seems like a really bad idea because I if I did tren, I don't think I'd be getting married. I think you've said in the past that you've used tren and you didn't suffer psychologically from it, but a lot of people do, and a lot of people would like to pretend they don't. But
yeah, tren was really weird for me. Yeah, I didn't get much of it anyway, and strangely, and yeah, all right, the gear could have been bad, but I don't think it was. But yeah, both the psychological, but also the performance side of things as well. I didn't get particularly strong. I didn't really hit my cardiovascular. It was weird. But then I had the same problem with M-Tren.
Yeah.
And the topic that we're going to talk about, I had the same problem with frog juice.
Yes. Yeah. We'll do frog juice last because I imagine there'll be 1 or 2 people sat here going, "Oh yeah, frog juice. I remember that," and there'll be a lot more people going, "What the fuck are they talking about?" I know at my gym we've got a lot of strongmen that train in my gym, and drug use within strongman powerlifting is I would say more old fashioned, not necessarily more reckless, but it's more I'm going to run 1.5 grams a test and I'll take some oxys on the day I train, that kind of thing. And at the moment they all reckon that DECA makes them feel depressed, which I personally never found. I found that to be quite mild psychologically, but all of them, and I wonder how much of that is psychologically driven because one of them said it. But anyway,
the mechanisms are there. I mean, the chemical mechanisms are there to cause that. There is, with no doubt. I never particularly suffered with it, but I have had a few clients that have struggled with it.
So, stupid things.
Well, there's stupid things, and then there's stupid things. Oh fuck. One. I remember getting into a conversation with somebody, and this drove me insane at the time. So he was moaning he was sensitive to gyno and estrogen, and he had some soreness of his nipples, and they were getting worse, and they were really getting to a point where it was actually causing him problems. In it was painful to wear a shirt and all this sort of stuff, and there was some swelling and lumps forming. And I said, well, drop some Novadex. I said, well, you can do X, Y, Z, or just take some Novadex. I'm not taking Novadex. Well, why not? Well, it lowers IGF-1. And I was like, right, okay. Yes, it does. Novadex is actually very popular within life extensionists because it's lower IGF-1. IGF-1 is linked to aging. Anabolics
is a metformin's popular in life extension.
IGF anabolics increase IGF-1 way more than Novadex is ever going to lower. So this guy would quite literally develop gyno, but not take Novadex because he thought he was going to stop him growing. What was even more hilarious, well, this is probably a bit cruel to be fair, but he was like 7 stone wet through. The other extreme is a guy that was about to go on to his 3rd kidney transplant. How he'd managed to get this was because it was all coming from family members, because he refused to stop using anabolics.
Sorry, 3rd kidney transplant. Do you mean it's the 4th kidney that's been in him? In terms
no, sorry, the 3rd. Sorry, no, he'd had 2 transplants. He was about to have the 3rd.
Sure.
So he no, I apologize. He fucked his 1st kidney. He got a transplant. He fucked that kidney. So this was his third kidney, not his
Right,
third.
yeah.
So I apologize. He within 3-4 weeks of getting out of hospital from the first transplant, he was running a 2.5 gram cycle, which included 700 plus a tren. I kept saying, I just need to stand on stage one more. And I kept telling him, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to kill yourself. And then he started having problems with that kidney. And I'm like,
Not
look,
massively surprisingly.
no, his EGFR, I think it was at the time was about 16, 17. And he did have a very mild underlying condition. And this was what was fucking the whole thing up in the sense of getting any sense into him. He wasn't telling his renal team, obviously, that he was using shitloads of gear. And so they kept saying, oh, we're really shocked. It's declined so rapidly and it's done so badly. And bear in mind, post-transplant, a kidney is very fragile.
Yeah.
He says, but obviously we know you have this slight marker. This light's got fuck all to do with it. You're literally poisoning yourself, mate. But it was fine because he was getting. So what he decided, this is what he decided was he was going to hammer a cycle. And if it killed it off, it was fine because you have another one lined up.
Right. I see. Yeah. like a racing car driver with backup cars.
Not booking backup, but yeah. It's not a pair of fucking socks, mate. You know what I mean?
So we've got an old boy that trains at Strom called Si, old strong man, and he was very open that he used to take a lot of gear back in the day, and since his transplant, he's obviously been a good boy. But he's struggling now. He's had a rough couple of years. But you're probably well aware of this, Dave, but some people listening at home may not be. I found out from him that when you have a kidney transplant, they don't take the old ones out because even a fucked kidney might give you 1% of EGFR. So they daisy chain them. So there's a guy that Si knows that has 5 kidneys inside him.
I think it depends on. I think Andy Bolton's was removed because it was cancerous.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's
so there's issues there, but I didn't actually know that, to be honest.
Yeah, so Si's got 3. He's got his 2 original ones. Apparently they shrivel up, but they still do a tiny little bit of something.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a guy who knows that's got 5 inside him, and they put them at different places, kind of daisy chain them along, which is fascinating.
It is. That's cool, actually. I quite like that.
Yeah. So I wonder maybe if you could get like 5 kidneys from China, if you could take more gear, like just 5 fresh ones.
I think if you speak to the right Eastern Bloc sort of organization, they might be able to arrange one for you. Obviously, the big thing with kidney transplants is compatibility. I mean, I know we're taking a piss, but the big thing with transplants is compatibility.
I remember reading a thing about heart transplants as well. You can have 2 hearts, can't you?
Mm.
There's a heart transplant procedure where you have.
I think moving forward, we will get to synthetic replacement organs. I don't think it's a million miles away.
No.
Which probably has huge connotations for the steroid world, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose then it becomes a little bit of how much money can you afford to spend on replacing bits.
Yeah. I mean, something I've spoke to Broderick about. We actually had a podcast on it about the next big evolution in bodybuilding drugs is genetic manipulation.
Or designing a baby to win the Olympia.
Well, no, not even that. About your own genetic manipulation. I mean, to an extent, that's what a myostatin suppressant would be. You're manipulating your own genetics.
Yeah. Someone asked me the other day on the questions, how close are we to a real world myostatin inhibitor? And I said at the time, absolutely miles away, unless you've got a baby on the way that you can genetically engineer in a lab somewhere in another country.
The problem, as far as I'm aware, is so they use mice antibodies from a mice spleen, and myostatin inhibitors. This is what makes me laugh about the peptide versions. Myostatin inhibitors have to be grown. They're a live biodrug. They're a living organism. So your freeze-dried peptide from China is not doing shit. Yes, there is some slight suppression of myostatin from anabolics, and there is some slight from phosphorus, but not in anything that's going to be. The problem they've had is they can create a myostatin inhibitor. They can't create one that purely inhibits muscles.
Yeah.
And there's myostatin regulation for all sorts of parts of your body. And one of the problems they had in the very early stuff, and I do believe some of this hit the black market, was that it was causing internal organelle growth as well.
And
So
again, for those who don't know, because I know we get quite a few people who myostatin is the component within your genes that limits the theoretical maximum size of muscles, organs, that kind of thing. So the idea of inhibiting myostatin would be that you would grow much more muscles. And the example people always point at are Belgian blue cows, who are, I believe, are they genetically lacking myostatin completely?
Yeah, they've been bred that way. So it's basically a man-made evolution. They've picked the cows that were the most muscular with the lowest myostatin, and I don't think they were aware of the myostatin element when they originally started breeding the Belgian blue, but they picked the most muscular cows, and obviously muscular cows had muscular offspring,
and they look ridiculous.
Yeah, they are, and they've done it with dogs. They've managed to do it with dogs. They've managed to do it with mice, but there is usually an accompanying health problem. I do believe there is rumors that people like Marcus Rule has used myostatin. And if you've got a deep enough pocket, you can get some form of the development research that has been done. And there was rumor that Dallas McCarver had used as well. The evidence around Dallas McCarver was the fact that when he was autopsied, his internal organs were particularly large, and not just one, all of them were particularly large.
I suppose the counter argument that might be excessive growth hormone use, IGF-1 use, that kind of thing could potentially also cause the same.
I think it would be difficult to get IGF-1 that high, personally. But, I mean, we don't know enough about it to say, really.
I believe there was some genetic testing done on Ronnie Coleman as well, and I'm sure it was Ronnie Coleman had remarkably low myostatin and various other things.
I do think, I mean, there's those pictures of him first competing where he's supposedly natural.
Yeah.
But actually, I have a inkling to believe that, to be fair.
Like, I'm sure I read an article, and it was a good few years ago now, but they'd effectively done testing on Ronnie Coleman, and every gene you could have for fat loss was there, and every gene you could have for muscle building was there. And I mean, if it is true that he was natural in those first competitions, was it Kevin Levrone was supposed to have introduced him to the concept, or someone kind of pulled him to one side and said, like, what are you taking? And he was like, creatine and protein. If he really was natural, then that's he's one of the greatest bodybuilders to ever walk the earth.
Well, it would stand that he was one of the greatest bodybuilders to walk the earth anyway. I mean, he was one of the biggest. So it would stand to reason that there is a huge genetic
component
to that. Sean Tavernier is if you want a good example of good genetics in bodybuilding, Sean Tavernier is fucking amazing.
He's like an anatomy chart.
The fucker doesn't eat and he still grows muscle. I mean, he's just nuts. You know, he spent years trying to get smaller, and he's still better than most of us ever been.
So, frog juice, David.
So years and years and years ago, and I've always looked at compounds and looked at stuff, and I was compiling a load of cheat sheets, the wrong word, but they were basically little fact sheets on anabolics. And I went through the ratios and a little bit of anecdotal, dosings and management and this stuff. And I researched them absolutely ages ago, and I came across this compound, and to the life of me, I can't remember what it's called. And this is genuine. And I spoke to someone who I knew manufactured, and I said, I wouldn't mind getting some of this manufactured, see what it does, because on paper, this stuff should be phenomenal as a pre-workout or as a strength boosting compound. The androgenicity of it was through the fucking roof. And that was the end of the conversation. And then several months later, he claimed to have got hold of some. And he made a batch up. And he named it frog juice. And there was a bit of a stupid story about it. And it was just, I suppose, really a bit of fun. I
had a strange definition of fun back then, didn't we?
Well, from my point of view, I was just experimenting, and I was curious to see how this would work. If the research theory borne out in real life, because we know there's compounds out there with fantastic profiles that are shit. So I was just. I don't know. I honestly can't remember what it was called. I don't know, for one, if he actually got hold of the proper raw ingredient, if it was genuine what it was supposed to be, or if it was actually just a water-based, because I did suspect that it might have been a water-based methyltrembolone.
Yeah, so it was for people who'd never seen it, which will be a lot of people. It was kind of a white, almost like a windstroll.
Yeah.
It was. I think I used to use it in a green because it would block up.
It was weird shit. I mean, I tried it. I got absolutely nothing. But this is why I was saying I get nothing from M-Trend. I get nothing from Trend. So this is why I sort of thought it might have been that. I don't know. I think there was a couple of batches made and then it disappeared. And
there were the reason I mention it is because I've had a few people whisper about it again recently, and at the time there were rumors that it was a new bane along with something like methyltren or what's the thing they use for cats that are in heat? Check drops, injectable check drops. Milburn, yeah.
I like I say, as far as I was concerned, it was a single compound. It was a single compound. I do think it was water based, but I don't know for definite. And my involvement beyond that was nothing apart from, look, this stuff looks really good. I wish I could. And what I found with there were people that used it that got nothing off it whatsoever. And there were people that used it that gave them extreme clarity, strength, and performance with no sort of real downside. And these people were saying that they'd used M-Tren and they got negatives out of that, but they didn't with this. So I don't know, is the honest answer. I mean, it's gone and probably never to return. I can't for the life of me remember what the compound is. And to be fair, I think it's something that should be just
probably best that you can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it should just be passed to history, really. But yeah, from my point of view, it was really very much a case of, I wonder what this would do if someone could get hold of it.
Yeah. But like I mean, within Strongman, it was the drug of choice, probably 2015, 16.
But I have no idea if what produced was the compound I'd suggested or what went into it beyond that point. Because so the person has since sort of disappeared and gone a bit doolally. So I don't know.
And if there is anything masquerading as frog juice now, it's probably not frog juice.
No, I
can't. Even if it is, there's no way of knowing what frog juice was.
Yes, there isn't. I'm sorry. I wish I could stand here and say, oh, it was X compound, XYZ. But
probably best you didn't, even if you could.
I don't fucking know.
From personal experience, I thought it was really good. But at that time, I thought all drugs were really good. Did I just hear you get summoned for tea?
I did, yes.
Thank you so much for your time, Dave. Love to Shoshana. You can get in touch with Eval via their website or their Instagram. What are your social media tags at the moment, Dave, or website? Or
website is www.evabloodanalwiners.com. I know it's the way I remember to spell it. That's why I say it. Facebook's the same, and I think IG is the same. I think there might be E-Val in those. I can't honestly remember.
This won't go out this weekend, but I just saw it before we came on. I believe this weekend you're at King's Gym.
This weekend we're at King's. So we're at Kelvin Hines' place in Crewe on Saturday. We're at King's in Croydon on Sunday, but we're at King's in Croydon every last Sunday of the month. And we're at Rotherham Ultraflex. Again, we're there every last Sunday of the month.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your tea. And I will see you soon because the season is due to start very shortly.
Yes, I'm dreading it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.